This is your sound souvenir of world-famous Greenfield Village, where American history comes to life. Founded in 1929 by the late Henry Ford, Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan, is a 200-acre full-scale panorama of American life as our forefathers knew and lived it. In this picturesque and inspiring village are found more than 100 historic buildings moved from all sections of the country and restored to appear as they did a century and more ago. The shops with working craftsmen, the simple cabins, and the elaborate homes all paint a vivid and nostalgic picture of America's full, rich past. We are at the village gatehouse where all tours begin. Here comes our carriage, so let's get started. The low gray building on the left is the village print shop and bookbindery. All the printing for the village is done. This is the sound of an 1862 Stillman and Allen steam engine, which powers all the equipment in this building. And here is a printing press, which was in general use about the turn of the century. And that old press is still turning out fine printing for the village. We better hurry. We've timed our visit to Sir John Bennett's jewelry shop exactly right. Remember those two giant effigies, Gog and Magog, who strike different tone bells to announce the time? Well, this building and Gog and Magog are time. Let's listen. One of the most inspiring buildings here in the village is the laboratory of Thomas Edison, and more particularly, the second floor of this famous building where we are now. It was here that Edison produced the first practical incandescent lamp and the first phonograph, along with numerous other inventions. Here's a demonstration of the first phonograph by a man who actually worked for Mr. Edison.
Here we have a model of Mr. Edison's phonograph the way he invented it. It was hand-operated. The record was a sheet of tinfoil wrapped around this brass cylinder with a mouthpiece, a diaphragm, and a needle. You would turn it by hand and speak into it first and make your record, and then you would play it back with the same machine.
Hello, hello. Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, that lamb was sure to go.
Now, we turn this back to the beginning and play that record over again, and this is the way it sounded.
Hello, hello. Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, that lamb was sure to go.
Why build a bridge and then put a roof on it? Well, there have been many explanations for the covered bridge, but the most logical one is that a roof protects the main beams from the weather, and the box-like sides add strength and rigidity to the bridge. Now, the Ackley covered bridge we're coming to originally spanned the Wheeling Creek in Pennsylvania. And now we're going to drive right through the covered bridge. The homes of Greenfield Village range from simple cabins to much more elaborate dwellings, tracing the American home through 3 centuries of development. For the beginning of this story, Greenfield Village has gone back to Old England and has brought from the Cotswold region a cottage group illustrating the homes of our English forefathers in the first half of the 17th century. Remember the sheep at Cotswold Cottage? And the ducks? As you approach the neat, white, imposing home overlooking the river, Did you hear strains of My Old Kentucky Home, or was it your imagination? Here is the Stephen Foster Memorial Building. Stephen Foster, America's famous folk song composer. In this house are many heirlooms of the Foster family. Oh, yes, there above the mantel is the painting of Stephen Foster, who at the age of 14 composed his first song. Well, it sounds like the captain of the Swanee is signaling a landing. Shall we go aboard? All the passengers are aboard the Swanee. The crew have hauled in the lines. There's the captain's signal, and it's full speed ahead. Do you hear the stern paddle wheel churning the water as we move majestically up the river? The era of the stern wheeler is ended, but for a few moments, we're in the last century. Ashore now. There's the Logan County Courthouse from Lincoln, Illinois, where it was erected in 1840. As a young man, Abraham Lincoln occasionally practiced law in this building. The first floor was used as a courtroom, with a judge's bench at one end and a fireplace at the other. Remember the log fire? Also in the courthouse is the chair in which he was seated in the Washington Theater on the night of his assassination. The days of Lincoln were the days of the blacksmith. Sounds like the smithy is hard at work. Sure enough, that's the sound of the bellows the smith is pumping with his left hand, forcing air to the forge and keeping it glowing red to heat the horseshoes. Then he'll start to shape the shoe on the anvil. Remember how the sparks flew as we watched? Then, finally, the smith plunged the shoe into the tub of water. There's the tintype studio. And here's the old-fashioned general store. That's the sound of the old hand-operated. In the background are the voices of the children buying penny candies, wooden whistles, items so typical of the general store. You hear the wind chime? Many homes at the turn of the century usually displayed these glass wind chimes on the front porch. Here in the village are many famous buildings. The Clinton Inn and the traditional dinner bell that stands outside. Henry Ford built his first automobile in that brick woodshed that stands over there. Of course, in those days, it stood behind 58 Bagley Avenue in Detroit. Ford's first car eventually led to the famous Model T. And here comes one of them now, still chugging around the village with a load of visitors. Stand back. Here he comes again. He's turning around, and he's going to stop right in front of us. Say, you need any help? No? Okay. There are over a dozen craft shops operating in the village every day. And here we are in the Plymouth carding mill. That's the sound of the hand loom that is weaving cloth at this very minute. That heavy sound is the beater packing the threads tightly together. And now let's listen to the sound of the spinning wheel. Well, we're outside now. Oh, just a minute. No fire. I just couldn't resist ringing the old fire alarm triangle standing next to the hand-drawn fire engine. The beautiful church on the rise just ahead is the Martha Mary Chapel. Here, non-sectarian services are conducted of Greenfield Village. This is Greenfield Village, preserving for the future the physical surroundings in which American customs and institutions developed. In speaking of his beloved Greenfield Village, Henry Ford said, "When we are through, we shall have reproduced American life as lived. And that, I think, is the best way of preserving at least a part of our history and tradition. For by looking at things people used and that show the way they lived, a better and truer impression can be gained than could be had in a month of reading." Yes, this is Greenfield Village, Dearborn, Michigan. A monument to the past, an inspiration to the future.